Okay. Like most people, 2020 was definitely not an easy year. I remember my family was having a New Year's lunch at home when we got texts and calls that something had happened back home in Malaysia. I knew that something had happened to my grandfather, but I just wasn't sure, what exactly had happened. I thought that just like previous times, he'd be admitted to hospital, and despite all our worryings, that everything would turn out okay and he would be fine. But God decided to call him home that day, and it was all very, very sudden and shocking, because just a few days prior, we were celebrating Christmas together, and the thought of him being gone was just incomprehensible. I knew that he believed in Christ and that he would be with God in heaven, but still, despite this, it was hard to believe. It was hard to feel anything other than sadness. And for a large part, I was in a weird limbo between acceptance and denial. I remember when I would go over to visit, he would always be eager to teach me how to drive in his old manual Proton car that's probably been around for longer than I've been alive. And there was always something that needed fixing, and I could never understand why he just didn't get rid of it and upgrade it to something new or better. And it will certainly be more efficient rather than spending all that time, effort, and money to send it down to the shop to find out what was wrong with it and to get it fixed. But I suppose it was because he cared enough for it. And the thought that I would never be able to do these things again and that these things would only exist in my memory was painful. Due to circumstances, the funeral had a lot of Catholic influences and a lot of traditions held onto by the older generation, by older relatives. And I remember feeling so irked because there were a lot of extra things like needing to pray for his spirit or needing to wash my head with water before entering the house after the burial. To me, the simple fact was that he had died and he was with Christ in heaven, and all these other things were so unnecessary. And I felt so frustrated because I just wanted to say something, but these were older people, and given my emotional state at that time, perhaps my words might not have been so kind or respectful, and I didn't want to make a scene. But I'm still thankful that even through this experience, I was reminded of God's love and reminded of the fragility of human life. I was reminded of the fragility of human life, but also this wonderful gift that God had given us, and that even though our pain might feel like an eternity, that with God in heaven, there is no pain. During the lockdown, I had a lot of worries about family back home in Malaysia, especially my grandmother, worries about the COVID situation too. When would we get to worship back in church again? Everything was being taken online, and then worries about my upcoming enlistment as well. As someone who's very much an introvert, the thought of spending days being stuck with 15 other people in a small bunk, subject to constant shouting and scolding, didn't appeal to me very much. So NS was definitely something I was worried about. Fast forward a few months into the year, during NS, where one of the major highlights would be field camp. And it was during the rainy season of the year, and so most of the days were wet. And I remember one of the days we were sleeping in this open space, and at about 3 or 4 a.m., I remember feeling a few drops of water on my head, and I was thinking, it's just a drizzle. It's okay. It had just rained the day before. There was no way it was going to be raining so heavily again. I don't even need to take out my raincoat. I can just go back to sleep. And of course, the next thing it started to pour. And so the wind was blowing heavily, and we were all scattering around, struggling to gather our things and build as decent of a shelter as we could. And We were all cold and wet and dirty. And as I sat there in our half-decently built shelter, I remember thinking, what am I doing here? And it was mind-numbing just waiting for the rain to stop. And as I let my mind wander, the first thing that came to mind was a familiar children's song, "With Christ in the vessel, we can smile at the storm." And I couldn't help but smile at the irony. And as I thought of more hymns to encourage myself, I was reminded of yet another hymn, another lyric, that though the swelling waves surround you, I surround the waters deep. And I remember feeling so comforted knowing that despite the circumstances I was going through, despite all the bigger worries at the back of my head, that I had this great and powerful God who loved me, and that this great God of the universe was bigger than all my problems, and that I wasn't alone in facing them. Strangely enough, when I focused less on the situation I was in and more on God, the wind seemed less harsh, the rain seemed to lighten up, even if just a little, and I felt just a tad bit warmer. One thing I sometimes do struggle wrapping my head around is God's love for us who are wretched sinners who deserve nothing but death. Why love us who are broken and more trouble than we are worth? He could have easily wiped us and replaced us with something better or something new. But no, God chose to send His only Son to die on the cross so that we might be saved. And even now, as God chooses to work on us, to find the parts of our lives that are broken and need fixing, so that we might be more Christ-like. I'd like to end off with a few verses that have been of comfort to me. 1 Peter 1, 3-7 talks about this great inheritance that we have received, and how, though just for a little while we might be grieved by various trials, that it's so our faith may result in God's glory. Romans 8 talks about how our present sufferings are not comparable to the glory that is to be revealed to us, and how all things work together for good, which is Christ-likeness. Maybe some of you here are facing challenges or are worried right now, be it unemployment, job security, the social and mental stresses of school. Maybe you've recently lost someone, or you're sick, or someone you love is sick. Maybe you have something you're battling alone and you don't even know how to put it to words or what to think or feel about it. God knows. He is with you in all of your struggles, and He loves you more than you can imagine, and He is faithful even when we are not. Remember that this suffering is only for a little while, and one day we will be together with the multitude of God's people, worshipping and singing praises in heaven. And what a day that will be. So, brothers and sisters, even as we enter an uncertain 2021, let us have certainty in our bright hope for tomorrow. Thank you.